They took my name off the wall last week. The gold letters, Mercer and Fields, LLP, glinted one last time in the morning light before someone covered them with black cloth. I didn't watch them pull it down, but I heard the sound from my office, a hollow metallic scrape like a shovel striking a coffin. I kept telling myself it was just a nameplate. But it wasn't. It was proof that I once belonged somewhere. Now, the space on the wall looks naked, empty, honest. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in, slow and quiet, until the ground beneath you turns soft and you realize you've been standing on mud all along. 3 months earlier, I was still Olivia Mercer, daughter of Robert Mercer, corporate lawyer, keynote speaker, and patron saint of polished reputations. That night, the ballroom at the Langford Hotel was dressed in crystal and champagne, the Mercer Foundation's annual benefit, a celebration of philanthropy, progress, and legacy. I had helped plan every detail, the lighting, the guest list, the talking points for the mayor. It was supposed to be perfect, our first gala since my father's death the previous spring. My mother said it would keep his spirit alive. When she said spirit, she meant image. I stood near the stage, smiling for photos, answering the same questions from donors who pretended to care about our scholarship program. I'd perfected the Mercer smile, gracious, distant, safe. Then, just before dessert, I noticed a man by the back doors. Gray suit, too plain for the event, holding a glass of water instead of champagne. His eyes met mine and didn't look away. I felt that small, unexplainable chill, the sense that someone knows something they shouldn't. He approached slowly, waited until the applause for my mother's speech began, then leaned close enough that I caught the scent of old paper and rain. "Your father wasn't a hero, Miss Mercer," he said quietly. "He stole from his own blood." Before I could speak, he pressed a cream envelope into my hand and disappeared into the crowd. I should have thrown it away. I told myself that all night, while pretending to laugh at donors' jokes, while shaking hands, while thanking people who didn't know me beyond the headline, "Mercer daughter carries on her father's vision." But curiosity is louder than duty. By midnight, the apartment was silent except for the hum of the city outside. My mother was still at the after-party. I poured a glass of wine, sat on the kitchen counter, and stared at the envelope. No return address. Just my name. Olivia Mercer. Inside were photocopied pages, bank statements, property deeds, and an old letter on yellowed stationery. The handwriting was my father's, unmistakable even after 10 years of seeing it only on birthday cards and legal memos. The letter began with a date, June 3rd, 1987. Then, "Daniel, it's done." The transfers went through. I told Margaret it was an advance from the trust. She'll believe anything that keeps the peace. We'll make it right once the foundation is stable. Daniel, my uncle, my father's brother. I read it 3 times before the words meant anything. The transfers went through. Transfers from which trust? At the bottom of the stack was a summary of transactions. Millions moved between family accounts, routed through shell companies that matched the Mercer Foundation's early donors. I felt my stomach twist. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile. Red wine spreading like blood under my feet. By morning, the documents sat in a neat pile on my desk, daring me to touch them again. The city outside carried on, taxis, sirens, ambition, as if my entire life hadn't shifted overnight. When my mother called to thank me for how beautifully I'd handled the gala, I almost told her. But something in her voice, that polished confidence, made me stop. Instead, I asked, "Mom, did Dad ever borrow from the family trust back in the 80s? A pause, too long, then carefully. "Why would you ask that?" "I found an old document." "I'm just curious," she sighed. "Your father handled the finances. Everything he did for this family. You know that, Olivia." That was the end of the conversation. But the pause had already told me everything. I spent the next few days in courtrooms and board meetings, pretending to be the same woman I'd been before that night. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone different. someone who didn't quite fit inside her own reflection anymore. At night, I dreamed of my father's study, the mahogany desk, the rows of foundation awards, the drawer he never let me open as a child. I started to wonder what was locked inside it. A week later, I used the spare key my mother kept in her jewelry box and went to the old house on Riverside. Everything was just as he'd left it, books aligned with military precision. Dust settled like silence over the room. The drawer opened easily. Inside, more papers, neatly folded, tied with twine. Account ledgers, early donation records, handwritten notes, and a single Polaroid, my father and uncle shaking hands in front of a bank sign that no longer existed. Both smiling, both triumphant. I sat there for a long time, holding the photo, feeling the foundation of my childhood shift under me. The charity that bore our name, the pride of our family, the reason my father was revered. It wasn't generosity. It was guilt wrapped in philanthropy. I locked the drawer again and left the house before my mother came home. The night air was sharp, heavy with the smell of rain and exhaust. I remember looking up at the skyline, those towers of glass and light, and thinking how easy it was to build monuments out of lies, how beautiful they could look until someone decided to see what held them up. That was the night I realized the truth wasn't just about my father, it was about me, the lawyer who'd spent her life defending his name, and whether I wanted it or not, the foundation was already beginning to crack. The morning after I found the ledgers, I couldn't eat. I tried. Coffee, toast, the routine that used to hold me together, but everything tasted like paper. Sleep hadn't helped. If anything, it made the questions sharper. I sat by my window watching the city climb into daylight. The cabs, the street vendors, the office workers carrying lives they still believed in. For a moment, I envied them. People talk about uncovering the truth like it's freedom. It isn't. It's exposure, the feeling of being stripped bare under a light you didn't ask for. That afternoon, I went back to the firm. The office smelled faintly of disinfectant and printer ink. My desk was covered with case files I couldn't focus on. My paralegal Jenna asked if I was okay. I smiled, lied, and told her I was just tired. At noon, I walked to the archive room, the one place in the building no one cared about unless there was a subpoena involved. The lock clicked open easily. I started searching through the foundation's public filings, donation records, and corporate tax returns. On paper, everything was flawless, perfect, too perfect. That's when I noticed it, a series of anonymous donor accounts that appeared every few years, always in round figures, always transferred in increments just below the IRS reporting threshold. The earliest one was dated 1988, 1 year after the letter I'd found. I traced the routing number, and my pulse quickened when the trail led back to a dormant account under Mercer Holdings, LLC, a shell company my father had dissolved the same year the foundation reached national recognition. He had buried the theft in plain sight, wrapped in good deeds and glossy press releases. I closed the file slowly, the sound of paper loud in the silence. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. That night, I drove to my mother's townhouse on 74th Street. The lights were on, soft jazz playing from the parlor. She was sitting by the window in her usual silk robe, a glass of white wine untouched beside her. When she saw me, her face brightened, then faltered at the look on mine. "Olivia, what's wrong?" I didn't sit. I handed her one of the ledger copies. "What is this?" Her hand trembled slightly as she took it. Her eyes scanned the page once, twice, before she set it down carefully, as though it might explode. "Where did you find this?" "In Dad's study, the drawer he kept locked." She exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't have gone through his things." "You knew." She didn't answer. The silence between us grew heavy, alive. "It's true, isn't it?" I pressed. "The charity, the money came from the family trust, from Uncle Daniel's share." She looked at me then, her expression something between anger and exhaustion. "Your father was trying to save us," she said finally. "The company was failing. Your uncle was reckless. If Robert hadn't taken control, everything would have collapsed. He did what he had to do. By stealing? By protecting," she snapped. The foundation gave this family everything: stability, respect, a legacy you benefit from every single day. I felt my throat tighten. So the story we built, all those scholarships, all those speeches, it's a lie. It's history, she said quietly. And history only matters when someone decides to rewrite it. 2 days later, I met my Uncle Daniel for lunch at a dim Italian restaurant in Midtown. I hadn't seen him much since my father's funeral. He'd always been the black sheep, the man with rumors swirling around him. He arrived late, wearing a wrinkled linen jacket and the same half-apologetic smile I remembered from childhood. "You look just like your mother," he said, taking a seat. "Which means I should probably be careful." I didn't smile. "I found the transfers, Uncle Daniel. From the family trust to Dad's accounts." He sighed, rubbed his temple, and for a moment I saw the truth flicker in his eyes. "I warned him it would catch up eventually," he said. But he wouldn't listen. Said it was temporary. Said he'd repay me once the foundation took off. And did he? "You're a lawyer, Olivia. You already know the answer." He leaned back, studying me. "If you're smart, you'll forget whatever you think you found. Your father's dead. The foundation's doing good work. Why destroy that? Because it was built on theft." He chuckled softly. "And every empire in this city wasn't?" That sentence stayed with me long after I left. For weeks, I lived in two worlds. One where I smiled through depositions and charity events, and another where I lay awake at night staring at spreadsheets, tracing every dollar back to its origin. The pattern was clear. My father had stolen millions from the trust meant for his brother's family and used it to start the Mercer Foundation. He'd turned crime into virtue, and everyone, including me, had worshipped him for it. Each discovery felt like peeling back another layer of my own skin. I started dreaming of the gala again. The music, the laughter, the man with the envelope. Sometimes I imagined finding him, demanding to know why he'd chosen me. But deep down, I already knew. Because I was the only one naive enough to still believe my father was good. One evening, Jenna came into my office holding a folder. "You've been getting these calls from the foundation's auditors," she said. "They're asking for authorization to release your father's old financials to the state regulators." My heart stopped. If the audit went through, everything would surface: the shell accounts, the transfers, the fraud. By morning, the Mercer name would be ruined. That night, my mother called. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "The auditors will reach out to you soon. Tell them you're declining cooperation. We'll handle it privately." "Privately? Or secretly?" "Olivia," she said softly, "this family has already been through enough. If the truth comes out, we lose everything. The house, the foundation, the firm, your career. Then maybe it deserves to be lost," I whispered. There was a long silence. Then she said the one thing I hadn't expected. "If you do this, you're not my daughter anymore." I didn't answer. The line went dead, leaving me in the dark with the hum of the city and the sound of my own breathing. Outside my window, the lights of Manhattan glowed, cold, untouchable, like the world my family had built. And for the first time, I wondered if I was ready to watch it all burn. I never realized how loud silence could be until I stopped returning my mother's calls. For 3 days, my phone lit up every hour, her name flashing like a heartbeat I was trying to ignore. On the 4th day, she stopped calling. That was worse. At the firm, people whispered. The foundation audit had been delayed, then suddenly withdrawn. Someone upstairs was moving strings. I'd been in the business long enough to recognize the smell of damage control. Monday morning, I was summoned to a private review meeting. When I walked into the conference room, the air was chilled and the blinds were drawn. My uncle sat at one end of the long mahogany table. Beside him, the foundation's managing board, all family friends and donors who owed their fortunes, in some way, to the Mercer name. My mother sat at the head. Her expression was neutral, flawless, as if nothing had ever passed between us. "Olivia," she began, "we're concerned about some of the inquiries you've been making. It's creating unnecessary attention. Unnecessary or inconvenient?" I asked. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably. My uncle's mouth twitched into what might have been a smirk. Let's not make this adversarial, he said. We're here to protect the foundation, your father's legacy. We all want the same thing. I doubt that. My mother folded her hands. There are documents, sensitive ones, that could be misinterpreted. If they were to leave the family's possession, it would damage a lot of good people. We'd like you to return whatever you found. Her tone was gentle, almost maternal. I recognized it from childhood, the voice she used before delivering punishment. You mean destroy the evidence, I said. Call it preserving order, my uncle replied. Your father isn't here to defend himself. Do you really want to drag his name through the mud when he can't answer for it? The words hit harder than I expected, because part of me still wanted to protect him, still wanted to believe there was a version of events where he wasn't the villain. I looked around the table. These were the same people who'd toasted my father's vision, who'd built careers off his generosity. Now they sat waiting for me to lie for them. I can't, I said finally. If what he did was wrong, people deserve to know. My mother's composure cracked for the first time. And what about me? Do I deserve to be humiliated in the press? To lose everything your father and I built? You didn't build it, I said quietly. He stole it. You just decorated the walls. The silence that followed was absolute. Then she stood, gathering her papers. If you go through with this, she said, you'll regret it. When I left the room, I wasn't sure whether I was trembling from fear or relief. That evening, I received an email from HR, effective immediately. Olivia Mercer is placed on administrative leave pending internal review. No explanation, no meeting, just exile. By the next morning, the story had leaked. Not about the theft, but about me. Anonymous sources claiming ethical breaches, whispers that I'd misused firm resources, doctored files. The narrative was being rewritten in real time, and I was its villain. Jenna tried to defend me online until the comments turned cruel. I told her to stop. My mother's final message arrived that night. A single sentence. You've made your choice. Don't come home. I spent the next 2 days in my apartment surrounded by boxes of evidence, trying to decide if truth was worth this kind of loneliness. The papers were spread across my floor like a second life I couldn't step around. There were moments I almost called her Mom. To apologize, to beg her to understand that this wasn't about revenge, that I just wanted honesty. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered her face in that boardroom. Cold, composed, unshakable. She had chosen the lie, and now she wanted me to choose silence. On the third night, I went for a walk. The city was restless, alive with sirens and rain. I ended up outside the Mercer Foundation headquarters. Glass facade gleaming under the streetlights. My father's name etched 20 feet high in marble. Inside, the lobby guard recognized me. "Evening, Ms. Mercer," he said with an awkward smile. I nodded, walked past him, and stood before the giant portrait of my father. He looked proud, benevolent, untouchable. I waited for anger. But what I felt instead was grief, not for him, but for the version of myself who once believed that doing the right thing was simple. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. The investigative journalist's number was still there, the one I'd saved weeks ago but never dared to call. I hit send by morning. It was everywhere. Mercer Foundation, under investigation for fraud. Photos of my father beside words like embezzlement, cover-up, betrayal. The firm terminated my partnership within hours. The foundation board dissolved. Donors withdrew. My mother vanished into silence. Her lawyer handled everything through letters. The world moved quickly when reputations fell, and I was left in the wreckage, watching the empire crumble exactly the way I'd imagined. Only now it felt less like justice and more like grief. A week later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a short note in my mother's handwriting. "He did it for us. You destroyed him for nothing. Don't contact me again." Beneath the note was a small velvet box. Inside lay my father's old fountain pen, the one he'd used to sign the foundation's charter. I turned it over in my hand, half expecting it to burn. Instead, it was cold, just metal and ink, like any tool, its meaning defined by the hand that held it. I sat at my desk, surrounded by silence, and opened a blank document. The headline read, "Statement from Olivia Mercer." For once, I didn't rehearse or polish my words. I just wrote, "My name is Olivia Mercer. The truth cost me everything, but for the first time, I can breathe." The first few weeks felt like living inside a pause. The city kept moving, but my world didn't. No office. No mother. No last name anyone wanted to be near. When people passed me on the street, they didn't see a lawyer or a whistleblower. They saw a scandal in heels. I tried sleeping late, pretending I didn't miss the rhythm of deadlines and meetings. But silence can be loud when you've built your life around noise. I sold the apartment on Madison. It was too close to everything: the firm, the foundation, the ghosts. I moved into a one-bedroom in Brooklyn with peeling paint and a view of the river. It wasn't much, but the air felt different there, honest. For the first time in years, I cooked my own breakfast. I took walks without checking my phone. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. A few months after the story broke, I received an email from a woman named Maria Alvarez. She ran a small community center in Queens that helped people who'd lost savings to fraudulent charities. She'd read my public statement and asked if I could give advice on a case they were fighting. Almost deleted it, old instincts, but something in her message felt real. So I went. The center was in a converted church basement, walls lined with mismatched chairs and overfilled filing cabinets. Maria greeted me like an old friend. No pity, no curiosity, just gratitude. She introduced me to a family who'd lost everything to a fake veterans fund. Their lawyer had quit when the media attention faded. "Can you help?" she asked. I hesitated. The old version of me would have checked retainer agreements and liability clauses. Instead, I said, "Yes, I'll do what I can." The case was small, messy, but it mattered. I spent nights drafting letters, tracing accounts, coaching victims through depositions. It wasn't glamorous, no boardrooms, no gala lights, but for the first time, my work didn't feel like damage control. It felt like repair. Words spread quietly. Other victims started calling. Within 6 months, Maria and I turned that basement office into something bigger, the Mercer Project, a legal aid initiative for victims of financial deceit. The name was her idea. I hesitated, but she said, "Make it mean something better." So I did. One afternoon, nearly a year after the scandal, I saw my uncle outside a courthouse downtown. He looked older, smaller. Somehow, he nodded when he recognized me. "You did what you thought was right," he said. "You burned the house down, but at least now we know where the rot was." I didn't answer. He gave a faint smile and walked away. That was the closest thing to forgiveness I would ever get from my family. That night, I found another envelope in my mailbox, no return address. But the handwriting was my mother's. Inside, a single line. "I watched your interview. You looked strong." He would have hated it. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Maybe both. Sometimes I still dream about the old office, the smell of fresh paper, the hum of ambition. But when I wake now, I don't feel loss, I feel space. I keep my father's pen on my desk at the project. It's just a pen, but every time I sign a document with it, I remind myself a tool can build or destroy. It depends on the hand that holds it. The headlines have moved on. People forget scandals faster than they forget songs. But in a small corner of New York, a few families sleep easier because someone fought for them, and maybe that's enough legacy for one lifetime. Let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel Her Side of the Story. Thanks for watching until here.